I'm waiting for one, Mr. Oh, no, I'm not. Are you waiting for anybody, Mr. Gibson?
Mute. I am not, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. We'll give it a couple minutes here till 6 o'clock.
Good evening, Mr. Otero. Mr. Otero, good to see you both. Claire, good to see you.
Hello, Mr. Romero.
Okay, the time is now 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting to order and wish all of you a very happy new year. I hope your holidays were great. The board members are participating via Zoom meeting. I'd like to welcome those who are participating via Zoom and those watching the board meeting via live streaming. The link to the meeting is on the district web page under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. If the board is on break, the screen will fade to black and the sound will be muted. In the event there is a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We have Mr. Hidon participating via Zoom. Mr. Hidon, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We have Mr. Frank Otero participating via Zoom. Mr. Frank Otero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Mr. Stephen Otero, can you hear me?
I can.
Mr. David Vickers, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Dr. Arsenio Romero, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Walter Gibson, can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Smith.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Gibson, will you please announce the meeting?
I will. This meeting has been announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Salinas Schools Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Gibson, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I would be happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. That will bring us to item number 4. Mr. Gibson, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Smith, there are no changes or deletions to tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. That being said, I'll stand for a motion on the agenda.
I make a motion, we accept the agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to approve the agenda as presented by Mr. Gibson and his staff. I will stand for a second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Frank Otero. Dave Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Eloy Giron, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That number 5, board 5A, election of officers. The board members elect officers each year. At this time, we will elect the president for the upcoming year. For office of the president, I will stand for a nomination for the office of board president.
Mr. President,
Mr. Giron.
this morning we had a really wonderful meeting. It was all 5 of us, a few of the other staff members. It was word that was used there was collaborative, and I thought it was we all worked collaboratively towards goals that or towards answers that we were presented with scenarios. We have a new superintendent on board right now. I would like to, and I know there's been a lot of talk recently, and I support this 100%, that we're all requesting a board retreat. So now that we have a new superintendent, we'll be giving him future goals. We will be having a board retreat. After we're done with those meetings, I would like for us to proceed and restructure our board. So at this time, in the form of a motion, I'm going to be asked to table this for at least 60 days until we complete our board retreat, meet with our new superintendent, give future goals, and we'll have a path forward. But that will be in form of a motion.
Mr. President,
Mr. Frank Otero.
I'm not making the motion, but I would make the motion, but I would like to see Brian Smith assume the presidency for another year. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Otero, I apologize. I didn't finish my motion. I would like for it to stay the way it is for 60 days. We get a handle on things, leave everything alone, leave Brian there. I mean, Mr. Smith there. And in 60 days, if we need to, we revisit it. But I would like to see the members, the structure of the board stay the same until we're completed with that board retreat and we complete our future goals. I'm sorry, Mr. Frank Otero, I didn't finish that motion the right way. So I would like to just leave it as is, and we'll revisit that in 60 days once we have a path forward. Sorry about that, Mr. Otero.
So, Mr. Hedon, in order, I need to understand this. So you want the board structure as it currently stands to stay for, did you say 60 days? I understand the retreat and everything, but are you saying for a period of 60 days?
Yes, at least 60 days, and then we'll revisit this.
So, and I appreciate that, Mr. Frank Otero. So I have a motion by Mr. Eloy Hedon to leave the board as it's currently configured for a minimum of 60 days until after our board retreat. I believe I said that the way you wanted it.
Yes, I would like to. Yes, I would like to meet as a board. I have our board retreat, meet with our superintendent, give our future goals, and at the 60-day frame, at that 60-day mark, we'll go ahead and revisit this.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Eloy Hedon to leave the board as it is, table item number 5 for 60 days, minimum of 60 days. I'll stand for a second.
I'll second that motion because I guess we're going to have a discussion after this, right?
Sure, we can have discussion now if you want.
Well, I'll second the motion.
I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Board members discussion.
I honestly believe this is probably a really good idea. I think, Dr. Romero's not officially on site, although he's got a real nice sign behind his back until the 18th. And I didn't know we were going to have a retreat, but I think a retreat would be nice, especially to have it facilitated by Dr. Romero. Yet to be determined, I guess. And I think this, since we're having the change of leadership, I think that's a pretty good idea. But do we table it, or do we set it up for agenda on a date 2 months from now or 2 meetings from now, or how does that work?
We can set it up for a specific day if you want. I mean, I don't know the meeting schedule for, that would be maybe the first meeting in March, say, whatever that date is. Would that work for you, Mr. Hedon?
Yes, that would work perfect with me because As a matter of fact, our board policy states 2.3.1 that it will be the first meeting in March. This reorganization. So it'll fall in line with that.
So I'm pretty sure that we don't have a date for our March meeting. Is that correct, Ms. Wolf?
Actually, that's not correct. Give me just a moment. Your meeting in March is March 16th.
It is March 16th?
It is. And the
I'm
board
not-
policy, I believe we changed that. It might have been updated since then, but it was the first, it's usually the first Tuesday after. The reason it changed last year for January was because of the board election changing. Normally your board meeting, your board election is done in February, and that's why they did the first Tuesday in March. So, but if you want to go, and then last year you did the first Tuesday in January because your election was in December or November. So just let me know.
So it's March 16th is our first meeting in March.
It is the only one, sir.
So okay, I apologize. The only meeting in March. So I guess, Mr. Hunon, would you like to rephrase your motion given that date, or do you want to stick with the one that you put out there for the first meeting in March?
I have no problem amending that to make it March the 16th.
So I have a motion by Mr. Eloy Hidon to leave the board as it stands until the first meeting in March, which is March 16th. I will stand for a second.
I'll second that again.
I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Any more discussion, board members? No further discussion. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Franco Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero?
I vote yes, and I would like to ask Frank to put me on his campaign committee on electing you president back then.
Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number that's a big item. Item number 6, approval of continuation of district remote learning plan through January 19th, 2021 per the governor's mandate. Was there a comment?
Mr. Smith,
Mrs. Wolf?
since you have a B on that, can you just state it so that I have it on the minutes that we don't need B since we've changed A, that we will not need to act on item B?
You want me to do that in the form of a motion?
I don't really, it's up to you as long as I have it so I can put it in the minutes so it's not just hanging there.
So would the cleanest way be to do it for all of item number 5?
Yes, sir. And that way we would table both A and B if you don't mind, 5A and B.
I don't mind that. Are we going to do the whole motion and vote all over again?
It's certainly up to you, but I just need to make sure that you're including both A and B on that.
I want to make sure that we are including everything that we need to include. So, board members, I will stand for a motion on the entire item number 5A and B.
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Otero, Mr. Frank Otero.
And Mrs. Wolf, I don't know, this is a clarification. The appointment isn't, we don't vote on the appointment. The president makes those appointments.
That is correct. I just need to make sure that when I'm putting this in the minutes, I just want to be able to say that all of 5, and then if it's all right with you, I can just put on 5B that it was not needed since the A was tabled. If that's fine with you guys, then that's all I really need. You
Well,
can just
Mrs. Wolf,
say
I
that.
have a solution, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah, we go to item number 5B. Can I just recommend that we leave the appointments as they are?
exactly. That's perfect. Thank you.
I am going to leave the appointments just as they are, and there's no vote needed on that.
Correct.
Good point, Mr. Otero.
Perfect.
Perfect. Now that
Thank
will
you,
bring
guys.
us to that will bring us to item number 6. Approval of the continuation of the district remote learning plan through January 19th, 2021 per the governor's mandate. I will turn this over to Superintendent Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So in actuality, this item is a bit of a misnomer. When we put this agenda out just before we left for the holiday break, that was the governor's mandate. It is no longer the governor's mandate. So tonight we will be talking to you about some strategies for bringing students back to school in small groups, consistent with the discussion that we had at the last board meeting. Brian Chavez, if you would put the PowerPoint up, please.
So, Mr. Gibson, I'm assuming that after the presentation, there will be some sort of a recommendation for us to vote on?
Yes, there will. Yes, there
Okay.
will.
Perfect, thank you.
So this presentation is actually a combination that is part of the transition to a new superintendent. So this is a 3-part presentation. I'll be doing the first piece. Deputy Superintendent Brian Bacher will be doing the second piece, and your appointed superintendent, your new superintendent, Dr. Romero, will be doing the third piece. So Brian, if you'd switch the page, let me update you quickly, and there's not a lot of update here because we've gone over this so many times. The facility safety updates. We have in place building safety protocols. They were developed by Jackie Kelly Romero in concert with Brian Baca and the rest of the executive staff. So things such as when you enter a building, you have to have your temperature taken. It has to be recorded on our application. You have to wear a mask when you enter the building. Anytime that you're in the building, we ask you to socially distance up to 6 feet from anybody that you're in contact with. Those protocols that we've gone over many times, those are still in effect. We have sanitation protocols for the building. I have a 4-page outline of those protocols in front of me, developed by Andy Garcia and his staff for cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing the building. These will become much more important if we have more people in the building. But we have those protocols in place. We've used them in a very limited way, cleaning only those spaces that we've been using, and many of the classrooms we haven't been using. So these will be accelerated and accentuated as we have more people in the building. We have plenty of PPE. We had a meeting this afternoon at 3:00 with all of the administrators and program leaders in the district. Claire Searmans was very clear that we have plenty of PPE on hand, but did ask all of those people, the building leaders and the program leaders, to check their storehouse of PPE supplies, face masks, face shields, sanitizers, all of the stuff that we've had on site for a very long period of time. Anything that we need, she asked people to notify her so that it can be reordered. The one piece that we do not have is the fourth piece, HVAC. The guidelines for moving air inside of a building require number 13 air filters. And we do not have those, nor will our air exchange systems accept those. So we are having to go to an alternate system of using HEPA filters. Those are on order. They will be here probably by the end of next week. And we will begin to install those HEPA filters in places where we will have students and staff. So I think we're up to date. I think we're ready. The one big change is our HVAC system, and that's a guideline that came out from the state quite a long time ago. We did a complete inventory of all of our air filters and realized that we need to augment those with HEPA filters. And we will begin the process of doing that in the next week. And by the time we get to a point perhaps later in the year where we have our facilities much more fully utilized, we will have installed those in all of the places in our building. So I think in terms of safety, we are where we need to be, and we are prepared on a limited basis to bring some students back to school. And tonight we are going to recommend to you, if things stay the same, if the governor doesn't issue new guidelines, if PED doesn't tell us that we can't bring students back to school, we are going to propose to you a timeline to bring some special needs students and athletes back onto our campuses by the beginning of the next month. So Brian, if you'd, first of all, are there any questions from the board? Anything I can update for you? Okay, Brian, if you change to the next slide, Brian Baca is going to talk to you about the new protocols for surveillance and case management. Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. So as far as the reporting for our case management, we still have been actively, doing our contact tracing and reporting as required by PED. Those protocols that were described in our last meeting, they have not changed. It has been a joint effort. As far as the number of positive staff cases, since we began tracking this back in March, we have had 26 staff members that have tested positive. Through the contact tracing that was done, none of those cases were actually gotten it, or they were infected at school. They were actually from the community or through a household member. We've also had no spread of cases with the staff that once we identified them, we followed our protocols. We got them off campus. We were able to do our contact tracing. And so we had zero spread. That's an important piece about it that I think we can all be very proud of. As far as the number of positive cases, we did have 2 positive student cases that we were made aware of. They involved athletes. We did go through the process of identifying those athletes and those that they may have come into contact. But again, based upon those 2 separate isolated issues, there was no further infections of our athletes. One of the new initiatives that we're trying to do, or actually is part of our reentry plan, is we're going to be incorporating the surveillance testing. As required by PED, we are required to surveillance test 10% of our staff in order to have in-person learning or to resume our athletic pods. Through Dr. Arsenio and the team here, we are able to get a collaboration with Vault Testing. We have acquired 600 tests. These are the home-based saliva tests. We will be randomly selecting 10% of our staff members. We will be sending them a link with their unique code so they can go on, register. The UPS will deliver the test to their home with instructions about how they are to return it through the UPS store and get it back to us. So that is something that we are looking at our first groups. And after this meeting, we did talk to our site administrators today, let them know that's coming. Our first group of people that will be surveillance tested, we're going to be meeting with them as far as and letting them, explaining the process to them. So this also was done in collaboration with Nurse Jackie and the rest of the admin team to get these in place. So it's something that we are preparing for as we welcome and get to that next phase of getting more people on our campuses and resuming some in-person testing. So I stand for any questions regarding the reporting protocols or anything on this slide.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Baca mentioned something on surveillance testing. Is the surveillance testing just required when we're hybrid, or is it required when we have staff working essential office also?
No, it's required when we bring students back to school in whatever configuration. So we have to,
Okay.
test 10% of the staff who are going to be working on that campus or in that location. So that's not just the teachers, Mr. Hiron. That also includes custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers who might be transporting them. So we have to know how coaches on the athletes. We have to know how many adults will be working with students in any one of these settings, and we have to test 10% of them every week. So that's going to be an ongoing protocol. So if, for instance, the pandemic subsides and we decide to bring kids back in a hybrid or some other schedule, 10% of the adults that will be in any building where students will have to be tested on a weekly basis, on a random basis.
Thank you. Okay. I'm clear on that. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to Superintendent Designate Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. President, members of the board, I think this is going to help with your question, Mr. Hiron, about what you were just discussing. What we want to do is start to talk about what January, and we are already in January. Today was the day back with teachers through professional development yesterday, and a first day of instruction today, and how the next few weeks are going to roll out. Mr. Gibson talked about how we ended the semester and what some of the requirements were from both the governor's office, from the Department of Health, and from Department of Education. And very quickly, things change very quickly based on new information that we have. So as of tonight, this is what I want to be able to talk to the community about, talk to the board about what the next few weeks could look like. And I want to remind everyone that we want to be able to make decisions based on the latest information that we have. We want to make sure that we keep the safety of our staff and our students and our community at the top of the list of what we're doing as we move forward. But being very optimistic, we want to be able to be prepared for any and all scenarios. And so what I'm talking about tonight is an optimistic scenario that we can move into over the next few weeks. So yesterday, January 4th, we had the semester begin. We had professional development happening throughout the school sites, wonderful conversations happening between the schools, and brought us also into where we can begin the surveillance testing. You heard Mr. Baca talk about the protocols and the procedures for surveillance testing. We've been spending the last few weeks really discussing how this is going to work and making sure that we have a good, solid, purposeful process for how we're going to do this, because this is the first step into how we start to get kids back into a face-to-face situation with teachers, which I think we can all agree is the best environment for them to be in, but we want to make sure that it's a safe learning environment before they come back. So as we do that, today started our first day back with our virtual learning settings. And on the action item tonight, you are actually going to be voting on staying in that virtual learning setting up until the 18th. And based on the information that we have working with the Department of Health and the governor's office, this is something that does need to stay in place until that time. Again, at any time, the governor's orders could change, but we want to go with what we know. But based on that, that's going to allow us to be able to be ready and put these procedures in place for starting to have students come back to some in-person opportunities. So we will continue on in this virtual setting starting today. But then during this time, we're able to implement that surveillance testing protocols. If everything is going smooth and we're able to do that and show proof and documentation back to the Department of Health, we should be able to start having our athletes come back for in-person practice in the 5-to-1 pods starting on January 19th. And this is important for a few reasons. One is we want to be able to give them time, because optimistically, we're going to be able to start with much of the NMA schedule starting February 1st, where seasons are going to begin. This is going to allow those athletic programs to have about a little under 2 weeks worth of practice. I know it's not a lot, but it is something to help us get prepared for that. It also allows us to be able to implement the surveillance testing protocols. And we're doing this with a controlled amount of employees. We're really looking at coaches in that first pool of people. And they are going to be directly working with those athletes. What this allows us to do is make sure that we have a great, strong, solid protocol for surveillance testing as we move forward. If we have any, any hiccups along the way, we're able to correct those within our population of our coaches, and we're able to improve the process every single day. Once we're able to get that in place, the next group of people we would like to be able to bring in starting January 25th is going to be some of our ancillary staff, specifically our diags for in-person testing for special services. This is really going to be important as we prepare for the second semester to make sure we keep on track with our IEPs. We're keeping on track with goals, and we're also keeping families and communicating with them about what our current situation when it comes to learning environment, whether that be virtual, whether that be some type of hybrid situation as we move into the spring. So it's going to allow us to start having those conversations with those families. And then if everything continues to go well, our numbers are doing well within the community. We have the surveillance testing in place. We're having success with athletics, and we're having success with in-person testing at special services. Then we would like to be able to start in-person learning for our 4 community enhanced learning classrooms. And this is at 4 different elementary sites. These are specifically students that some of our highest needs when it comes to students maybe that could be categorized as autistic, could be categorized as medically fragile. These are going to be classrooms where we feel that it's very important that they do have opportunity for in-person learning. We want to be able to provide that opportunity for them, but we want to make sure that it's a safe environment. And we want to do this very methodically, very purposefully. And we want to ensure that those classrooms are going to be safe for both staff and students. And so we will be, have some strict protocols about who has access to those classrooms during that time. That also is the first day for the NMAA schedule. And so we want to be able to be ready for those seasons as they start. And this is really just a glimpse at what the first few weeks coming back into our spring semester can look like if everything is going in a positive way. What this also allows us to do, though, is that if there is where we need to pull back on it some, we can do that. It's a very flexible schedule based on new information that we have when it comes to COVID positive tests in our community, when it comes to governor's orders. And we also are going to start to see the rollout of our vaccine schedules start to increase within our community and within the Valencia County. So that's going to be another piece of information that's going to affect this plan. I know that once we get past February 1st, the next thought on people's mind is, okay, what's going to come next? We're definitely want to be able to scale this up over time. And that's really what you see in the month of January is we're starting with a smaller group of staff and students, and we start to scale that up over time. And with success, as we see the success of our protocols in place, we want to be able to start to bring back more and more students. And some of those could be some of our K-5 classrooms, and of course, more SPED classrooms throughout the semester. But we want to be very purposeful about how we do that. And what I'd like to be able to do is very frequently update the board on what this looks like, and very much so update the community at each of our board meetings about how this goes, whether we're able to proceed forward, whether we have to pause and kind of stay where we're at for a while, or whether we need to pull back based on some of the positive cases throughout our community. So based on the action item tonight, I think it's very appropriate that we're able to stay in a virtual setting through the 18th. And then optimistically thinking if everything is moving smoothly, we should be able to start to bring back students, especially our athletes, on the 19th. And then again, bring the next group of students back, which are our elementary community enhanced learning classrooms, hopefully on February 1st. So with that, I stand for any questions. I want to make sure it was clear what I talked about. And everything that you heard tonight from Mr. Gibson to Mr. Baca is all part of the plan to be able to make sure that we can roll this out in a very purposeful and safe manner for our students and our staff. So with that, Mr. President, I stand for any questions.
Questions, board members?
Yes, I have a couple of questions,
Yes, sir.
Mr. President.
Mr. Otero?
So once we go to class teaching, what effect is this gonna have on our teaching staff and our teachers' aides who are teaching remotely and are gonna be teaching on site?
Yes, Mr. President, Mr. Otero, that's a great question. You are going to have some classrooms that are going to have some students still in a remote setting. And then we may have some that are going to be able to come back for in-person. So even with these classrooms, the community enhanced learning classrooms, we're actually going to be starting them very purposefully and slowly also. So you're not going to see these classrooms coming 5 days a week for a full day of school. You're going to see them coming for possibly 2 days a week or 2 half days a week. And what we want to do is make sure that we can be successful with both of our in-person learning students and our students still learning in a virtual environment. And those teachers are going to have both those responsibilities. So that's going to be something that we're going to learn and grow into. We have a good idea what that could look like, but of course there's always, we want to be, good at what we do as we start to do that. So again, we're going to be starting slowly, even with those classrooms. And as we get better and better at it, and we're able to fill in the gaps, we're able to expand and scale up on those in-person learning opportunities.
And I have another question. Is this going to be the choice of the parents to decide, or is it going to be mandated on our enhanced learning classrooms?
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, it's always absolutely the parents' decision. And this is why it's important for us to start having some of the in-person testing happening with our special services, to start to be able to make contact with those parents and let them know exactly what's going to happen so that they understand what the class time is for in-person learning, but I'll also be able to answer all the questions when it comes to safety of those classrooms and how that's going to work. There's other pieces that need to be involved in this too, how we set up transportation, how we set up food services. These are all conversations that we want to be able to have with those families. But can a family say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable yet doing that? They can absolutely do that and stay in a virtual setting.
And I still have some more follow-up questions. And if in fact the children that come to school are special needs kids, are we going to have additional aids to try to help them acclimate themselves to a different setting in the classroom, to having to make sure that they keep their masks on? What has been considered for that?
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, those are absolutely considerations. And I think as we roll more out into a larger venue and we have more and more in-person learning, this is going to be something we want to be very thoughtful about for all of our students, about how they come back into a in-person learning environment, about the procedures that we have, from the classroom to the playground to the cafeteria. And then you're right, there is this new piece added on when it comes to wearing your masks, to social distancing, to washing hands. Those are all going to be things that we have to teach and make sure we have procedures within the classroom to do that. Now, these classrooms do have additional support. There are more adults and there are fewer students in there to be able to support that. So it is something that we're going to have to do as we prepare students to be ready for that. But absolutely, those are going to be there will be adults to be able to support that.
And another question. I'm not going to say one more because more questions come up as we're discussing it. The people that are the staff that's going to be working with these kids, speech, physical therapy, all these other, I don't know what all's involved. Are they all going to be coming to work with these kids, or is it going to be one aspect of the special needs?
Ms. Chavez, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I want to make sure I don't misspeak. I know that we definitely want to start with our DIAGs coming back for in-person learning. There could be some possibilities for our ancillary staff to be able to have some in-person, but again, we're not going to jump right into that. Ms. Chavez, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Romero, Mr. Gibson, Mr. Otero. At this time, we are not going to have ancillary come into the buildings with that February 1st start date. Our ancillary is providing support to more than one school site. So they need to maintain their schedules so we can continue consistency for the students who will be coming on our campus and the students who will not be coming on our campus. Our diagnosticians will be on our campus at special services, just as they were from August until we suspended testing on November 2nd.
Okay. And I got one last question, and I don't know who can answer this. The HEPA filters that we're going to be providing for our systems throughout the district, is that funding coming or is it designated from the CARES Act funding that we received when this all started, or are we having to fund that through our general budget?
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, let me turn that over to Ms. Sermons. I know we had a conversation about those HEPA filters, the installation. We wanted to make sure that we knew what the delivery dates were going to look like and what instructional environments we needed to put them in first. Again, you're going to see this kind of scale up throughout the district. We want to make sure that we have these 4 classrooms taken care of before there are students in those classrooms. But Ms. Sermons, can you speak to that?
Yes, sure. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Dr. Romero, we did receive some funding over the Christmas break to be able to purchase filters. We would be sending the bar to the finance now in January. I'm pulling it up right now so I can give you the amount. I'm not having it right in front of me, but we do have CARES money still available. We also received some additional funding specific for the filters. I know it was somewhere around $250,000, and we're looking at probably right around 620 HEPA filters that we will have to purchase. So we are in the process of looking at the procurement for those items and also making sure we have enough funding. And if we don't have enough funding at the money we receive from the state, then we will go to the CARES Act.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, when we get that exact number, I'll make sure to share that with you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions, board members?
Mr. Smith?
So I do not have any questions. Oh, Mr. Hidon.
Mr. Smith, yes. I'm excited with the schedule that we have right here. I'm glad 2021 is here. We got good news coming around. How are we going to make sure that we can get this information out there to the community? And that question isn't to you. I guess it's going to be to Mr. Gibson or Dr. Romero.
Mr. President, Mr. Hidon, what we're talking here is this was very purposeful in working with a certain group, a population of students and staff. So you see here we're looking at bringing in athletes first. This is going to be a great opportunity because our coaches have been in constant contact with the athletes throughout this process, throughout the fall. And with this, they're going to start to be able to set up those in-person learning or in-person practices in a 5-to-1 pod. So they're going to be hearing from their coaches and their teams to very quickly be able to make this happen. Now, when it comes to our community enhanced learning classrooms, this is where those teachers are going to be able to communicate with those families to start to plan what that's going to look like. And this is going to be conversations that they're going to have that's going to be directly tied to their individualized education plans to talk about when and how long they're going to be in this in-person learning. So again, I kind of gave the example about how an example could be a student would come in for 2 days a week for maybe a half a day. And then we get to see how that works. And if everything is working well and things are safe and things are positive, we can start to increase that as time goes on. But so to answer your question, Mr. Hidon, coaches will be communicating with the athletes, and those classroom teachers will be communicating with those families and those students.
Okay. I have one more question, and I don't need an answer tonight. I kind of don't want the answer tonight, but I think it was last May or June that we approved the CARES Act money. It was like 1.68 million. And during the transition between Mr. Gibson and Dr. Romero, if you could be prepared for the next meeting, when you finally take over, if we can address that, if we have enough money in that CARES Act, if we're gonna have to support different things, just so we have that on our radar. Okay.
Mr. President, Mr. Hone, absolutely. We can give you an update on the CARES Act and the gear money that we have coming in. We can absolutely give an update on where we're at and what our projections are for the rest of the semester.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Dr. Romero.
Absolutely.
Board members?
Another follow-up question came, Mr. President. This is Stephen again.
Mr. Otero?
It's in reference to, I guess, the vaccine. I know residents of New Mexico can apply for the vaccine. Is there any special accommodations made for our school districts and for our teachers on the vaccines? Is there any that you know of? Is there any special applications that our district has to submit in order to try to get our teachers the vaccine?
Mr. President, Mr. Otero, there are developments and they're coming out where we are now in the state of New Mexico in the third week of being able to provide vaccines for our frontline workers, our healthcare workers. They are labeled as 1A employees through the state, and they are going through that first round of vaccines. Now, I am working directly with the governor's office and Department of Health. I know Mr. Baca is also working very closely with Department of Health and Office of Emergency Management. And there are some positive notes out there about how it can roll out as early as next week. It's hard for me to say exactly what that's going to be because these are conversations we're having with Department of Health, Office of Emergency Management, and of course of our local health teams within Valencia County. What I can say in confidence now is that there are some bright spots coming up soon. Just those plans have not been settled yet, but we're working very hard to make sure that our staff, our school personnel are going to be have the opportunity for the vaccines soon. What we're working on is labeling them as meeting the definition of 1B staff members or employees in the state that are recognized as essential workers. And those conversations are going well. So I definitely am looking forward to give you updates. That's kind of the update as we have at the moment, but I think things are going to progress pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any more questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Thank you, Mr. Baca. Thank you, Ms. Searmans. Thank you, Ms. Chavez. So if there's no further discussion, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Gibson. We're going to need some sort of a recommendation for item number 6.
So, Mr. Smith, I would recommend that you adopt the plan as presented by Dr. Romero through the 19th of January with the proviso that we be allowed to begin returning students to school, athletes on the 19th, and the diagnosticians and special services on the 25th, and the community enhanced learning programs on the 1st of February, with the proviso that we continue to have the permission of the governor, the Department of Health, and the Secretary of Education. So I guess making it a simple to be in the form of a motion that you adopt the timeline that we presented to you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I'll stand for a motion on item number 6.
Mr. President, I move
Mr. Vickers.
that we proceed with the timeline as presented by the various superintendents this evening regarding remote learning and getting back to in-person learning in an incremental fashion.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Vickers.
will second that if Mr. Vickers will repeat it word for word what Mr. Gibson said.
I have a motion by Mr. Vickers and a second by Mr. Hidon to approve the recommended timeline as presented by Mr. Gibson, Mr. Romero, our staff for our re-entry beginning for the school year. I will stand. Is there any further discussion? I have a motion and a second. There being no further discussion, Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Carries 5-0. I just have one suggestion though, now that we've approved this, if we can get a summary of the approved timeline on our webpage as soon as possible, I think that would be beneficial to us, with the caveat that all of this timeline is based, the execution of this timeline is based on health mandates and governor health orders and governor mandates. I think that would be beneficial for our district. That's one of the ways that we could get the word out immediately that we have actually approved this. And then I think that that's one thing that we could do right away. So if we can make that possible, that would be great.
Make it happen.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 7, announcement of meetings. As allowed by the Open Meeting Act and District Open Meetings Resolution, on occasion, a quorum of board members attend the same function, including those held at school. In those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. I would like to announce the following meetings. On January 12th, 2021, there will be a Finance Committee meeting at 4 o'clock. On January 19th, there will be a regular board meeting at 6 p.m. The meeting locations are dependent on mandates from the governor. If need be, they will be held via Zoom. I'm anticipating both of those being held via Zoom. That brings us to item number 8, adjournment. I will stand for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion. We adjourn this meeting.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to adjourn.
I'll second it.
I have a second by Mr. Eloy Hidon. Mr. David Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Frank Otero,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero,
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you so much. Technology, everybody. Thank you.
Good
Night.
night.
Bye-bye, everybody.